This is a country place, 100 kilometres south of Le Havre, in Normandy. Roman Catholic rites being done the real old-fashioned way by a country curé in France. But this is a priest with a difference. The difference? A village church with an enormous following. On Sundays, its nave is packed to respond to this parish priest, Father Quentin, who's rung out the hosannas to the rafters here in the parishes of Le Chamblac, La Roussière and Trinité the last 32 years. There's another difference. Though Father Quentin's in France, he speaks and understands English. He is an Englishman. Well, a Cornish Scot, actually. And this is his presbytery, Fr Montgomery-Wright.
Hello.
Ah, I brought you something from the boat.
How nice of you. Won't you come in?
Oh, thank you.
Come along.
And here he lives with his sacristan, who's called Christian.
Well, I was just getting lunch ready. I don't know if you're hungry. I'll take you out for that.
Can I do anything to help?
Well, you can help Christian if you like. He's going to get the table. You eat omelets, can you?
Eat anything, Father.
Oh, good. Well, this is pretty well anything. But it will probably keep the wolf from the door. If I get these things out, they aren't meant ever to come away.
Do you want me to cut some bread?
Yes, a bit.
Cut 4.
Well, this omelet's going to be like, because...
Well, it'll be welcome, Father, won't it?
Well, I hope it will, if you've got enough appetite worked up with that crossing of yours. OK, Christian? Christian, il n'y a pas de verre, là, pour le vin, s'il te plaît. And look, you can find some wine in here, if you like.
There.
Well, Christian will find you a corkscrew. He can always find a corkscrew. It's one of his...
Christian?
Intuitive knowledges.
Corkscrew. Can he open the bottle?
No, we'll have to do that for him.
But he can drink it?
Yes, he's got quite a good thirst.
Very good.
Not bad. It's good colour, isn't it? Ah.
Christian's been with him since he's been here. A helper who needs some help himself.
Well,
where do you want me to sit?
Would you like to sit there beside Christian?
Oh.
He likes his place at the end. Do you mind?
No.
Or would you rather sit there?
There are, Christian.
Voilà. I'll say grace if you don't mind. Benedit Domine Sedectu Dona, Codectu Largitatis Sum Sunturi, per Christum Dominum Nostrum. Amen.
Amen.
That is 7, huh?
Yeah. Tart.
First now, the meal or the boo? Meal?
The reason I wanted to meet you, Father Quentin, is this business with the Archbishop Lefebvre.
Well, ça c'est quelque chose, Archbishop Lefebvre. You're like the monk, I hope not, but there was a monk in England said to me, "You're not one of Lefebvre's men, are you?" And I said, "Well, yes, he's the devil." So I don't know if you feel that way about him without really knowing much about him. He's a great friend of mine, at least I'm a great admirer of his. I told my bishop that, wasn't very pleased. And Archbishop Lefebvre is really the contrary of what he's made out to be. Christian, a little while? Yeah. Well, a little while.
He's the one who wants to have Mass in Latin and all the old-fashioned ways.
Well, it's much more than that, really. He's, in the present state of the Church, he's rather like St. Athanasius was in his time. And it was Athanasius who was right, and the others were wrong.
Father Quentin Montgomery-Wright's defence of the rebel Archbishop Lefebvre had, as I listened to it, a medieval complexity quite beyond me. But you're not a heretic.
No, we're not heretics. In the present time, all that...
And though this rebel Archbishop Lefebvre has now been excommunicated, Father Quentin hasn't. He takes from his presbytery what he believes is within the rules. Not just real Roman Catholic rites in the church on Sunday, but 7 days a week. It's Ecce Cure whistling his Ave Marias down these Norman lanes. He sees a purpose to the ritual. Here, he's off to visit a child he's christened. But rather than presents given round a newborn baby at the font, he's waited until the petit enfant Max is old enough to enjoy and appreciate. From whom and for why comes the christening day anniversary teddy bear? Father Quentin, he's been country curé here for so long. He christened not just this generation of children, but he baptised the parents in the same tradition. His parishioners, they're mostly families and many isolated farmers. Their nearest town from the presbytery is only 10 minutes' drive, called Broglie, on a road between Rouen and Le Mans. But it's very small, just a crossroads of agricultural implement shops, and on certain days there'll be a little marché. Nowadays in France, it's an extremely uncommon sight, much more so than in England, to ever see a man of the cloth in the cloth, dog collar, cassock and the hat. He does this deliberately, so everyone can see him for what he is. He shops himself. For though back in the presbytery his sacristan Christian is useful, apart from opening wine bottles, it's Father Quentin who has to shop for both of them. And he'll have to cook the cod when he gets it back. It's a rough country, this. It's not poor, but it's not rich. And the land in winter is exposed. It lies fairly high up. Rich cream, still milked from spotted cows, but increasingly they stare across hedgeless fields. What were pretty little apple orchards for the making of cider and wonderful calvados have been more and more grubbed out for cereals that'll reap the farmer a bigger common market subsidy. The great houses. Why, the lady of the manor here, she's Monday to Friday in Paris selling security devices, and the chateau a shuttered neighbour to Father Quentin's church, which he maintains so traditionally, though he wasn't raised French or a Catholic. So how did he, back in Cornwall, come by his first sniff of interest in Roman ways?
Sniff of religion? You were going to say I began with the incense. I know everybody thinks that high church people begin with incense. No, actually the thing that bowled me over, if you can call it that, was the experience of going into a little tin tabernacle of a church which was built in St. Austell, in Mount Charles, the faubourg, the sort of suburb of St. Austell, behind the railway line, of course, suitably, for Roman Catholic emigres in the time of the 1914 war, I think it was. For them, they built it. It was in about the size of a garage, you know, in corrugated iron, painted green, I remember. And this was always a subject of fascination because it was the mysterious place for those mysterious people which we call Roman Catholics. And they were supposed to be very much allied with the devil and so on, especially Amerigesi, Roman Catholic was a name to. However, I went down to see this with a friend of mine from school. We ran off that afternoon and did French leave, if you like. And I discovered this chapel. It was most impressive for me because it was the real presence, as we call it in the Catholic Church, this idea that Christ was actually present in that host in the tabernacle. I didn't have to be told it. I knew something was there. And that conviction has always remained with me ever since, that sense of the real presence in the Eucharist. And that is perhaps the real point de départ, the starting point of my becoming eventually a Roman Catholic.
What did your mum think when you became one of the bogey men?
Mother. Mother and Roman Catholics were not the sort of people that got on together. And mind you, this was when I was still an Anglican and began to be attracted by the sort of Anglo-Catholic movement, you see. Mother was furious, of course. I mean, she didn't like the things I bought back from the SPCK bookshop in Truro with crucifixes and pictures of Our Lady and so on. And was very, very annoyed about it all. And said that we didn't want any popery in our house, you see. However, Mother got used to it in the end.
Did you fulfil her dreams, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I think perhaps my mother never took me very seriously for a long time. And she used to say to her friends, oh, you know, they call me Toby in the family. Toby always wanted to be either a clown or a clergyman, and he's managed to be both, which is rather unkind of her, but still, she didn't mean it unkindly. Just a mother's way of looking at it.
After switching, he was retrained at an English seminary, but his bishop sent him to the French worker-priest movement. Then as an assistant in Paris before this living, where his widowed mum could cross the channel from Cornwall and help her Toby move in.
December's day, 2nd of December, 1956.
What did she think of it all?
She was horrified. There were no lavatories in the house, no accommodation of any sort for civilized living, really. Still.
What did she think of the graves?
Well, Mother was very surprised at all these artificial flowers that she saw everywhere. So one morning I missed her, and about midday she turned up, wiping her hands, and I said, I've got rid of them all. I said, well, I put all those plastic flowers over the wall. And of course she didn't realise that it doesn't belong to me. I mean, I don't control the cemetery. So we were rather alarmed about it. But Mother had the sort of way that won everybody's heart. Nobody really blamed her for it, you see. But she was a very strong critic of the upkeep of our cemeteries and the sort of things you put on the graves, as you see, artificial flowers. It's just when I want to get into her. Come in.
You've got 3 of these churches to look at.
Yes, 3 of them like this, not quite as beautiful. I think this is a lovely church. It's a very busy time for me just now, you know, getting ready for Holy Week. I've got to get all these statues covered up before Palm Sunday. And hope you don't mind. Let's get on with this job now. See if I can get the right one here. Go on this statue. Looks right to me. It's rather like sort of fishing and the other way around, you know. To get the thing on a pole and get it up there. I really need a ladder, but I haven't brought one. Let's see if I can do this adequately. Quite a job doing it this way, but I suppose I can manage it. No. The stick will only come away, so I don't have too much.
Ah, you've done it.
Yes, that's it.
There's a lot of statues for a small church. So many are lovely and coloured. Were they like this when you came?
No, they were not like that at all. I tell you, we've had them all stored, you know. And the condition generally was so bad. There was a favourite owl used to come through that window at the back there. And Saturday night especially, he did all his business on the altar. Before I could have mass, I had to get the place cleared out first, you see. It was very difficult at the beginning.
In France, Catholic churches recently have, as if Oliver Cromwell had just walked through them, swept their old relics to the museum. For this is not what today's Mitterrand generation ought to look up to.
I know what you want me to say, that they've banned us as superstition. But I don't think any normal Catholic thinks that when he's praying before a statue, that the statue is answering him. But it does focus his attention on the saint to which he's praying, or if it's our Lord on the cross, to the sacrifice of the cross. Many people could do without them, but not everyone. And to put in the place of that a religion which is purely intellectual, with many readings and many long prayers and so on, is not always very successful. And the proof is in France, the de-Christianization of our neighborhood, for instance, and others, is lamentable. And I think is greatly due to this new look of being very modern and making all the churches look like garages.
Father Quinton, you are old enough to be retired, aren't you?
Oh, yes, yes. Long time ago, yes. But
why don't they do it if they don't like you?
Well, who said they didn't like me?
Bishops and company.
Oh, well, it's I who don't like them. They probably like me very much, being Christian people themselves. But, I mean, I like them all right. I just don't like some of the things they do, that's all. Some of them, I mean, I don't like... My own Bishop Lucius goes off to Africa to bring back communist agitators as a Lucas and not. But, he's a very nice man. I mean, I'm very fond of my bishop. I think he rather likes me too, in some sort of odd way, you know.
So you can stay here as long as...
I hope so. As long as God wishes, yes, that's right. And by the intermediary of those who really could get rid of me if he wanted to. I'm not an agitator of any sort. I mean, I'm a nice, quiet parish priest doing my job, looking after people.
The phone calls are not, however, always from his parish.
Presbyter de Chamblay. Hello, bonjour, Helen. For this week, pour l'instant, je prépare pour le jeudi saint.
In this entire French administrative department of Ure, Father Quintin is one of only 2 listed phone numbers prepared to accommodate people who want the old rights. This call was from a Northern Irish lady who lives an hour's drive from Le Chamblay.
Goodbye, love. Let's go. Bye.
Father Quintin, you are a busy man.
Yes, I'm rather a sort of Martha priest, you know.
Do another one.
Hello, Presbyter de Chamblay. Ah, bonjour, ma sœur.
The next call was from Paris. A family have to bury one of their own and want the last comfort with the old words and formalities. The committal was at a village where the family has a weekend home, 20 miles from Father Quintin's Le Chamblay, in another priest's patch. So why does Father Quintin turn out?
Generally speaking now, in our diocese and other dioceses in the neighborhood, the priest has now dropped the habit of going to the grave with the cortege, with the funeral procession, which I think is a shame, really. Perhaps priests can't go to every funeral if very hard-pressed, but I think the principle should remain that the priest accompanies the body of the person, with the mourners, the family, to the grave if possible. So, as this family came from Paris to be buried there, they asked me to meet them here and do the committal, which I did for them. See, I was free to do it and did it. Oui, c'est sûr. Comptez là-dessus. Au revoir, ma sœur. Mes respects.
Every day of the week?
Every hour of the day. Oh, you asked me if I was very busy. Yes, I said I'm a sort of Martha priest. You remember Martha and Mary? Martha said, I'm always doing everything, and Mary does nothing but sit and pray. And the Lord said, Mary, I was right. I hope you could be indulgent towards my Marthaism, if you like.
The diocese he's in, Evreux, is at the heart of a critically changing countryside. As there's less and less labour for men's hands on the land, the working rural living population is declining rapidly. And of the properties now coming onto the market, some 60% are being bought by outsiders for weekend holiday living. They may want romantically to be buried here, maybe, but as yet not that their children be educated here. It's just a few who deliberately, as you have to in France, opt out of the non-religious state system for one morning a week to come here.
Ils ont mis ça par terre, devant le cortège, vous savez. C'était une façon de faire honneur à un roi. Et c'était Jésus qui est venu. Il croyait que c'était qui? Oui?
In the primitive presbytery classroom, with the temperature down, it's catechism taught as it was, as Father Quintin knows no other way. And after, the children have their own mass. The boys enjoy dressing up to serve their priest as he'll serve them.
Our children sing the Mass in Latin, and it isn't that they don't understand it. If you say that Agnus Dei means Agneau de Dieu in French, it's evident, isn't it? It's the French language particularly has no real problem with regard to the Latin. There's no reason to sing in French when they have this beautiful liturgy in Latin.
He's very French now. Unlike his mother, Father Quintin's not to be buried in England, but once a day, almost before he begins his religion, he still keeps in touch.
Then it will be more prolonged. It will be even more prolonged tomorrow, but it might perk up a bit on Thursday. And you're listening to Today on Radio 4 with Brian Redhead and Peter Hopday. The time just after 8:30 now. Summary of the news from Laurie Macmillan.
How did he meet Christian? It was when he was in Paris 33 years ago. Father Quintin Montgomery knew the parents of this boy, as he was then, and they said, if you're moving to the country, can't you find a farm that'd suit our lad? Father Quintin tried, but couldn't, so he kept Christian on himself.
Ah, merci Christian. Voilà. Ah, c'est dans les mêmes. Pourquoi, madame, vous n'avez pas encore réclamé vos boucles d'oreilles? They want to know why I haven't collected my earrings, Christian. Publicity, my goodness. Oh, well, that's yes. I don't need any earrings. I might need a wig, but I won't be able to get that.
But come a crisp Sunday that'll brighten the end of a winter, and there's an occasion to look forward to that's very French. Palm Sunday, when traditionally families will bring branches of the box tree to church. And they arrive, those who always have, and those who like their religion at the weekend, old-fashioned as the cottages they restore. You can judge from the number plates, the 75 of Paris itself. They'll all pack these old Norman walls like it's Russia. But the performance is not for the audience. It's not theatre. He's a priest. When he does it, he says the Latin word, the old form for his God.
For me, really, the Mass is the central point of my existence. I'm a priest. I'm a priest above all else to say Mass every day, if possible. That is why I'm ordained. The rest all follows, if you like. And for me, it's an experience which is renewed every time I say Mass. And every Mass for me is like my first Mass. This tremendous mystery into which the priest is called to penetrate. He shares the priesthood of Christ at that moment. Christ acts through him. That is the whole sense of being used by God. The world needs the Mass. I think, honestly, what you appreciate most when you're a priest is that you never grow old. You are always dealing with successive generations, and you deal with children now, at least I hope I do, as I dealt with children before the war. And one doesn't realize one is getting older. One lives very much in eternity, you know, and the prayer at the beginning of Mass says, Ad Deum qui laetificat juventutem meam, I'm going to the altar of God, who gives joy to my youth. It is a perennial experience.
He loves the people, big congregations. He loves his car, little car. Couldn't do his job without the car. In the last 12 months, by the clock, he's driven 50,000 kilometres. It's the extra parochial acceptances. Like after Sunday lunch, he puts the poodle in the back and drives.
So this part is the wooded part of Chamblec. It's really the former...
He's 74 years old now. But he'll put his foot down in a minute for the 85 kilometres, non-stop to the industrial town of Alençon. Father Quentin,
Yeah?
why do you travel all this distance to do it again?
Well, because here there's no real the traditional centre in this town, and all these people are traditionalists who otherwise wouldn't have the traditional ceremony for the Palm Sunday, you see.
But why can't you borrow a church here to do it in?
That's another question. I think many times they've tried to get a church or chapel for their services, but so far it's not been allowed. I think it's a question of having the mayor should give the necessary permission. But I think he says that the bishop, at least the late bishop, had left instructions that no chapel or church was to be made over for the use of the traditionalists. Many empty ones, not serving anything at all, but not available for us.
What do the priests here think of you?
I don't know. I've never seen any of them. I've been here, coming here for quite a long time now. I've never met any.
Invading their territory as a rebel?
Well, if there's no one there, you'll see to invade. I mean, it's empty. No man's land, as far as I can see.
That's a European disgrace. That these two faithful Catholics can't have their mass said in a Catholic church in modern France when the church buildings are kept by the local council. It's had to be. Roman religion in our times as if in persecuted times in an unmarked hall. It's not illegal, but almost. And some French commentators say these worshippers of the old ways at the altar are politically of the National Front, anti-republican, of monarchist sympathy.
Alors, on dit encore une troisième fois bonjour ou pas?
Cette fois, je commence.
Vous trouvez que c'est la dernière?
Alors, c'est toujours...
Well, Father Montgomery-Wright will say the Latin form anywhere. Next day, he'd been driven to this family's chapel to say a private mass. When he was young and first crossed to France, this priest from Mevagissey, he was thought by the establishment here to be not Catholic enough. Now they think he is embarrassingly too Catholic. They've changed, not he.
Yes, they may be, but I think many of the clergy feel that they have to be with it, you know? And since they have been, it has been drummed into them that Vatican II was a new look for the church. It was the Johnny Wanto and so on, and has become something that has been imposed as being the solution to all the difficulties.
So the new look will take over your old parish?
Yes, it might well do, but what I have done will remain, not necessarily here, but elsewhere.
But when your time comes to get buried, you'll have what regrets?
Well, I don't know. I might regret not to live longer, or I might regret having lived so long. I can't tell you about that. All I know is they've got a place for me here, and there I know where I shall be eventually, you see. I shall be buried rather near the church door, so I can have a look and see if anybody's taking anything out after I've gone, you see.
Like those statues?
Some of the statues, that's right. Try to look after them if I can. Bon, vous n'avez pas le temps, hein. Vous n'avez pas le temps, maintenant. Vous restez 5 minutes? Oui. Je reste 5 minutes. Oh, d'accord, c'est presque fini. Bonjour, monsieur. Comment va, monsieur? Les choses étrangères, parce que... Bonjour, monsieur. Oh, non, vous ne dites pas ça, hein. Non, ça va, ça va. Pas au froid. Non, mais j'ai pas froid avec tout ce monde-là. Ça va. Ça, là, tiens, qu'est-ce qu'elle a grandi? Oh, là, c'est jolie fille. Oh, là, c'est bien ça. Bon, écoutez, tout de suite, je vous donne ça. Voyez ça. Parce que... Au revoir, madame. Every year, thousands of people visit this site. Mulberry Harbour, Armanche. the site of the landing of the 6th of June, 1944. I myself was not involved in that landing because I was still a young vicar, being curate in the church at Hoxton in East End. But I was on my way to Cornwall a few days before the 6th of June to prepare our summer holiday camp, and I took these children to escape the bombing in London. And there we were taking our sandwiches, eating our sandwiches, and taking our refreshments. And the whole Plymouth, with all the equipment of the invasion there before us, we could see everything that was there, and little did we imagine what it was to be used for a few days afterwards. Now, nearly 50 years on, much of the Mulberry Harbour has been eroded by time and tide. But enough remains to remind one of the terrible destruction that was wrought not only along this coast but throughout France. I first came here in 1946, just after the end of the hostilities, and Mulberry Harbour was still intact. There were signs of devastation everywhere, houses which had been demolished, and something quite different from what you see at the present moment. In fact, one felt that the war had only just passed there the day before. The Chamblac has been my home for the last 32 years. It's a small village halfway between Rouen and Alençon, a stronghold of traditional Catholicism. Although I love my parish and its people, sometimes I feel like a stranger in a strange land. As I sometimes say to them, you need to be a Scot to survive in Normandy. I've got altogether 16 kilometers of parish here, 3 parishes amalgamated, and really long distances. So there you are. I've got the car, and I'm using it all the time. I do so many 1,000 kilometers in a year. There are, I suppose, an equal number of people in each parish, about between 300 and 400. Altogether, just over 1,000 souls to look after. Which means that I have a number of people coming from the outside, from the exterior of the parish, some from a good distance, really, because they prefer our singing and our Gregorian and the Latin and so on. On Sunday mornings, there are cars parked all over the place. And some of them even from friends from abroad, from England and from Germany and elsewhere, which reminds me of a story. I had an old lady here to visit the parish with me one time from Scotland, had been a sister, a nun before, and as we came to our different crossroads where the Calvaries, I made the sign of the cross as a habit here. And this good lady was with me. About a fortnight afterwards, her brother and his family came here, and I drove them round. At the first crossroads I came to, I made my sign of the cross as usual, and they started to laugh at me, to laugh hilariously, they couldn't stop. So I said, well, what's wrong, what's wrong? And they were Catholics, I thought they would be more respectful. They said, no, it isn't that, Father, it isn't that. Aunt Mary told us, it's so dangerous to drive in France, Father makes the sign of the cross at all the crossroads. So. I grew up in the generation which associated the Flanders poppy with all those British lives that were lost in the 1914 war. Finding myself in this field of poppies in Normandy, a few kilometers from Pegasus Bridge, brought home to me the reality of those boys from my club in Hoxton who'd left their lives here, in this part of Normandy. Britain has so many medieval castles and historic houses, but France even more, and many splendid Renaissance chateaux, very large, difficult to keep up, which have fallen on evil times for that reason. And this one has met the same fate, but with a difference. This is the Chateau de Mayoc, the home of the Colbert family, descendants of the famous minister to Louis XIV. The original castle was built in the 12th century and rebuilt in the 15th, only to be destroyed in the 1920s
as a result of a maid carelessly lighting a fire in an attic room when she had been strictly forbidden to do so. Looks all right here today, but if you see this in the winter time, it's something stark and rather tragic, really. I think there's something admirable about the idea of rebuilding a chateau, at least as much as you could of it, and then hoping that posterity will come along and finish the rest. I thought that chimney was a factory chimney for years when I used to drive past outside without knowing the place at all. It really is I think this is an admirable piece of courage and restoration myself. Alors, comment allez-vous? Bien, merci. Très bien, Omer. The Marquis de Colbert-Laplace is also a descendant of the famous 18th century mathematician, Laplace. He and his wife have made a courageous start on the restoration, rebuilding part of the ground floor and one of the towers. Gin. Coming into this room does something to me every time, because it's, for me, a witness of the past and at the same time a witness of this extraordinary restoration that you've done here. Tell me, this room, this extraordinary room, was it always what it is now?
It was the dining room before fire.
The dining room of the castle, which goes right through there. But when all this, was this your work, all this restoration? I will see that first today. It's marvelous, yes. What? And is this where we are now?
No, on the other side.
I see, yes. Do you remember the chateau like this? You were?
I have.
You were?
4 years.
4 years old.
4 years.
Sadly, with no children of their own to continue the restoration, the future of the Chateau de Majorque remains in doubt. But there's no doubt about the continuity of Coupe Sarthe, for instance. For me, Coupe Sarthe epitomizes all that is historic and expressive of this part of Normandy, rural Normandy. A fortified site, lived in from earliest times, a manor house and a farm at the same time, where people live and do their work. You see the farm, the ducks, they're still living there as they have done all the way through. Simple farmers, obros, as Lavron would call them, gentlemen farmers, and very people of the terroir, rural farmers. Coupe Sarthe is a thing of beauty and lived in. Well, you know, when St. Lawrence was summoned to bring the riches of the church to his executioners, he produced the children from Rome. And the children are, after all, Churchill's future. Now, in my own parish, I find that children are of great importance. I don't have a juvenile mass, as they have in some places. I just have the mass, and the children are absolutely taken by the whole thing. They enter into the spirit of the mass. They enter the spirit of their catechism lessons. It's quite interesting to see how they love coming to catechism. And without flattering myself, I can say that we have a remarkable catechism in Chamblac, to the point that former children of the parish bring their children to me, asking me to have them in the catechism with the children from the parish. Now then, these children maintain our traditions. One of the charming traditions that remains in the church here is the pacre, when the young altar boys go to the houses, blessing the houses for me, and the people give them in return what should be traditionally eggs, eggs that were not to eat during Lent, you see. But now it's very often an offering of money that they receive.
Alors, allez avec bon Dieu.
Au revoir. Au revoir les enfants. Ces gens d'honneur, avoir donné à ces chanteurs.
The child of the presbytery is almost middle-aged. Christian came to Chamblac 31 years ago to live in an environment where his limited abilities could be best employed. He came initially to stay until he could be found another family. None was forthcoming, and he's been with me ever since. But Christian, he loves the telephone. He can't resist the telephone. If a telephone rings, even if I'm only 5 yards away, Christian answers and tells people I'll be on my way. Then you get situations when I'm not there and people phone and say, you're the curé de Chamblac, and Christian says, oui, yes. So then they say, you remember you baptized our daughter? He says, oui. So then they go on and say, well, now, our daughter's going to get married. Will you marry her? Oui, says Christian. The people are beginning at this time to smell a rat, and they think it's something wrong with me. That's Christian on the telephone. There's a famous telephonist, I can tell you, Commandeur Vera. But for the church, yes, he's almost indispensable in the sense that he does get things ready in the sacristy. He can lay out the vestments for the Mass in his own way, but he lays them out. And he will prepare the wine and the water for the Mass. Actually, the difficulty is if he runs out of wine, for instance, then he might be capable of putting something else there in the place, to go Calvados or something, or even leaving the wine cruet empty. So in the middle of Mass I find that what is in the wine cruet is not wine, and I have to send for something else. Those are little inconveniences. On the other hand, I can count on him for getting the Mass ready. Generally, Christian is a good sacristan. It's a sort of love-hate relationship, really, but I mean, it is real affection. I mean, I get very annoyed with him, of course, but then I know why he is Christian. He's not exactly like everybody else. So, I mean, I have to accept that fact. And, yes, when he's not there, I miss him. And I'm flattered to say that when I'm not there, he misses me, because even when he goes away for a fortnight with his family, after a few days, his stepmother tells me he's already saying, "Le père a besoin de moi," the father needs me. So I know that his heart is here. Christian is in his element when he is taking an active part in my pastoral duties. No more so than when he accompanies me as I go to take communion to the elderly and infirm around the parish, with whom he finds a particular affinity. For me, it is important to seek out those who cannot come to Mass on Sunday, but have a desire to be associated as fully as possible with the worshipping community.
Entrez.
Que la paix de Christ soit dans cette maison et avec tous ceux qui l'habitent.
For this lady, a former sacristan, my presence brings to her home the supreme moment of the Mass.
Notre secours est dans le nom du Seigneur qui a fait le ciel et la terre.
In giving Madame Legendre her communion, I experience the same spiritual satisfaction as when I give communion to the assembled faithful in the church.
Corpus Domini nostri Jesu Christi custodiat animum tuum, in vitam aeternam.
In 1944, I came to the conclusion to be a Catholic, one should be a member of the Roman Catholic Church. And so it was that I left the Church of England. Later, I was to become a seminarist in Bayeux from 1949 to 1952. Every Thursday, being the free day, I was allowed to go with my bicycle, a tandem with another seminarist, and we did quite a lot of cycling about, I can tell you, and quite a lot of visiting. So I know this particular part of Normandy, the Bessin, quite intimately, but now, of course, it's 40 years ago. The seminary was established by the Bishop of Bayeux in 1693 and staffed by priests from the Society of Saint-Sulpice, founded by Monsieur Ollier in the same century. Today, most of the building has been completely transformed, but the beautiful 13th century chapel remains neglected. The echoing footsteps of the seminarists have given way to the clatter of tourists. The building is now the home of the famous Bayeux tapestry. Poor old Suspicion Seminary. I wonder what Monsieur Ollier would think of the austerity transformed into first-class hotel for William the Conqueror and his tapestry. My, how things have changed. When I was here, we were 100 seminarists in this building. Now it's all William the Conqueror and the tapestry. We had a long corridor, cells both sides. I have my cell over there somewhere. There's no sign of it now. But I can remember so many wonderful things that happened here. I can think especially one Sunday afternoon, it was a big feast, and I had a new Shepherd and Woodward soutane, very pleased with myself, and my surplice, and I swept through the door, flung the door behind me, and walked down the corridor with no skirt to my soutane. It had been caught in the door. The funny thing is that although I've been here 30 years, I still don't know the first thing about farming. I must be the despair of the local farmers. But my, how things have changed. Orchards have gone, hedges ripped out, even the people have disappeared. Our railway line has ceased to be, and the Montgomerys too seem to be at the end of their line here. If you want to know what I'm doing, struggling up this rugged countryside, I'm looking for my roots. This is what it was all about. Over 1,000 years ago, here, Roger de Montgomery set up his hill fort. You see the fortifying walls all dominating the valleys around. From here, Roger II left with Guillaume the Conqueror, William the Conqueror, for the conquest of England. And finally, Henry I destroyed the Montgomery citadel, and a later castle was built in the valley below. But we are still very much alive, the Montgomerys. And if you want proof, the elm trees even here are still much alive. No Dutch elm disease here. Down in the village, I caught up with the man who has done much to revive the history of the Montgomerys. Dr. Jean Prado, a local historian, met me at the church to tell me more about my ancestors.
Eh bien ici, vous les trouvez puisque c'est dans cette chapelle.
The Montgomerys always come back to the site of their ancestors, and here the last of the Montgomerys in France was buried. And in the top of the little window up there, you can see their coat of arms. On the right are the arms of the Belhaims. Yves de Belhaim helped the young Duke Richard I to escape from the court at Laon by hiding him in a bale of hay on the back of a horse. On the left are the characteristic arms of the Montgomerys, with their baronet's ring and the 3 fleurs de lys in memory of France.
C'est ici le deuxième site.
Those are the ruins of the second castle. It was destroyed by Catherine de Médicis following the unfortunate accident in which Gabrielle de Montgomery put out the eye of Henry II. And so the high renown of the Montgomerys in France came to an end.
No, hélas. Je pense que ça mérite bien un Calvados.
Absolument.
After all that, and as it's my 75th birthday, I think we've earned a glass of Calvados.
Je vous souhaite un bon anniversaire et que cette eau de vie vous conserve encore très longtemps.
Ah, pas mal.
Bon anniversaire.
Bon anniversaire.
Voilà, voilà, c'est l'air. OK.
Voilà.
Et plein de choses gentilles.
Ah, c'est In Chamblac, as elsewhere in Normandy, the people love to celebrate their feast days. Food in Normandy is desperate because you eat cream with everything you can think of. Fish, fowl, and you don't have to eat boiled eggs here. You eat them cooked with a lot of cream and so that's the sort of thing that's made me what I am. I was much finer, slimmer when I came here from St. Cloud. I like food, yes, and I don't want to appear too sort of gourmand, but I appreciate what they give me. That's quite true, especially here in Normandy.
Alors, les enfants, écoutez-moi bien. J'ai dit mes enfants.
One of the highlights in the religious life of our children is the day of their confirmation. The traditional Catholic rite with bemitre bishop and candidates all in white has generally been replaced. No bishop, no white albs. In order to find the traditional Catholic confirmation service, we had to travel some distance to Rouen, which gave me the opportunity to remind the candidates of the significance of the occasion. There, in a temporary chapel, traditionalists from many parts of Normandy were robing their children for their confirmation by a young bishop of the fraternity founded by Monsignor Lefebvre. The sight of such a mitred bishop reminds me of my own confirmation by Bishop Fr of Toro, who seemed to me then to have stepped from the stained-glass window. But how does a bishop regard such an occasion?
Je pense, monsieur le curé traduira, c'est un renforcement de la foi de nos familles chrétiennes, de recevoir la grâce du Saint-Esprit.
The importance is to reinforce the faith of our families, of our Christian families, encourage them in their holding on to the faith.
C'est peut-être illégal, mais c'est parfaitement légitime. C'est la nécessité.
It may be illegal, but it's perfectly legitimate because it means that these people are able to receive the sacraments which they have a right to demand from their pastors and don't receive.
Ce sacrement est valide. This sacrament is valid. It must be accepted in any church.
Traditional priests, as with all priests at the moment, are in short supply. And I feel the need sometimes to get away and relax with my friends just to maintain my equilibrium. Yet there's a charming air of old worldliness about our neighborhood, where old methods die hard in the face of inevitable mechanization, and one doesn't have to go far to escape. I have many friends with as many interests in which I am invited to share. The Haras de la Motte is a particular favorite, where the Timmermans always have a ready welcome for Christian and myself. You give him some. I'll get you some more.
Avec ta main à plat.
Ah, Christian, do you know, give him some? Give him some. Give him some too. Huh? Like that. Ah, you are. Really? Okay. Juliet and Claude have only been at La Motte for 2.5 years, and in that period they've transformed it. At the same time, they're running a successful stud farm. The impressive half-timbered southern facade is an 18th century restoration, replacing the original medieval exterior. Tell me, this is the oldest part, isn't it?
Yes, it was built in 13th century.
I see.
By Nicolas de Maillot, the same, the one who had the Chateau de Maillot.
Oh, yes, I know the Chateau de Maillot, yes.
And it was destroyed at the end of the 16th century.
Yes.
and rebuilt again half of it.
I see.
Rebuilt again
100 years after, no?
in the beginning of the 18th century.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You
But
can
it was
see
not
the
done
difference.
at
Yeah,
the
yes.
same, in the same quality.
No, brick instead of stone. And
Yeah.
so. Très beau, hein? Ah, très beau. Un peu grand pour nous, hein, Christian. I was surprised you've only been here 2.5 years and you've done so much in the time.
We live here all the time, so we had to do all the necessary things very quickly. There was no central heating, there was no bathroom, no water. We were getting through the floors directly to the
You
cellar.
went right through the floor.
Yes.
Yes. Right
So we did very quickly. It was a hard job, but it's done. I think we bought the house because of the chapel and the other room underneath. So the chimney is going to be done now. The ceiling is done.
Yes.
The next step, and it will be finished with the house, will be the gallery upstairs. I think I will do a kind of English-style library.
As well as breeding magnificent black horses, Claude delights in the sport of carriage driving.
Well, you know, the last time I was in a horse-drawn vehicle, I think it was in a caleche from Truro station to the hospital in 1920. My mother was in the hospital. I've never been in a horse-drawn carriage since. But this is quite an experience, I can tell you. Is this sort of thing becoming popular in France now?
Beginning, starting now.
Yes.
We have about 1,000 people now in the French Horse Federation who are interested in carriages and 4-in-hand and things like this.
I think Prince Philip gave quite a fillip to the whole, if one may say so, to the whole question at one time, didn't he? Isn't he the man who made it popular in England?
Yes, and he is very good in this kind of thing.
Yes. Hi, Christian. Ça va quand même? Ça va, t'as pas peur, non?
No, merci.
Okay, you're a brave boy. Hang on properly. Ça.
Et après, devant l'entrée. Bon.
Now it's 40 years since I first set foot in Normandy, and my attachment to this region, with its many links with England, has in no way diminished with the passing years. As the French say, j'y suis, j'y reste.